this mobility, passive stretch, recovery-oriented session with a little bit of moving 90-90. Just kind of ease into this a little bit. This is something I need desperately on the cusp of my 60th birthday, just working through trying to maintain as much mobility as possible. So I'm just moving from one position to the next. I like to bring my feet into this a little bit, so I'll work big toe mobility, work through the other smaller toes as well. Just try to lift from the hips and lengthen my spine here. Just going from one position to the next, trying to draw this externally rotated knee down to the floor, sitting nice and tall through these positions, just alternating side to side. And as I do that, I start to loosen up a little bit. And I'm going to come into a little of this Indian pose, if you will, Indian sit, and just bring my legs together and lengthen my spine, and then just do a little forward bend from here. And for me, I like to just hold on to my legs a little bit and bring my elbows underneath my knees, and this allows me to get a little leverage. Again, lengthen the spine here as much as you can and relax the head forward. Shift side to side. Draw the legs in tightly and just relax the head down. That feels really good. All right, now I can bring a little bit more thoracic spine rotation. Bring the hips in again, and let's work through a little Bretzel 2.0. First thing I'm going to do is just again, come into this position and just lengthen my spine here. Try to rotate from the hips, and then I'll take this right thigh and just inch it back, so you can see that foot just inching back as I try to open my hips here. All right, and just breathe into this position, and then go ahead and see what I have here as I try to move and pivot on this left shoulder while I keep this left elbow locked out. Nothing forced, just see what I can get here. Keeping my right fingers underneath the left palm. That felt good. Switch to the other side. Rotate a little bit. And as I said earlier, this is something that I desperately need myself. Just continuing to treat each day as a new day and know that my flexibility and mobility is going to change a little bit. It's dynamic and it depends on a lot of factors. So I'm going to work with my body and not try to fight it, but at the same time, I do all of this with a sense of urgency because I know that it's much harder to get back if I lose it. Whenever we stop working on something like this, it tends to be the kind of thing that will go away, and it's much harder to get back, especially as we get older. So I'm going to pivot on this right shoulder, keeping my left fingers underneath the heel of my right hand and the right elbow locked out. Just work my way down into that position. That felt good. once more into this position. And a little forward fold, forward bend. All right. Let's move from here to frog. Here, I'm just going to go ahead and get as much width as I can, separating the knees. Just work very gently and gradually into this position. All right. This is a nice dynamic hip opener, groin opener. As I loosen, I'll go ahead and separate my knees just a little bit more. And of course, the challenge with this position is sitting into and closer to the floor with our hips. So there's where I'm bumping right up against my end range. Again, I'm moving ever so gently. You can try this on our forearms as well. Like whatever position is more comfortable for you is one you'll want to ease into at first and experiment a little bit. And just sit back very gently. Keep the insides of your feet flat on the floor. And again, as you gain a little bit more range of motion, go ahead and open up the knees. All right. Now, from here, move into long adductor. So I'm going to spend a few minutes on each side in this position. Remember, if you need to, go ahead and block the knee. We're looking for a nice, gentle at first, passive stretch of the entire inside of the leg, thigh, inner areas of the hip, adductors, if you will. This is the longer adductor because the knee is straight. I want to try to stand as tall as I can here. And again, I'm not forcing anything. I can really feel a nice stretch through this area. I'm keeping a general eye on the clock. I'm probably 6 or 8 minutes or so at this point into this routine. If I wanted to, I could go through pails and rails in that position. For now, I'm looking at this as just a gentle, passive stretch. Pails and rails is an option in any of these movements. Long adductor, frog is an excellent position to do some progressive and regressive angular strengthening for a little bit added mobility. And I think the key is finding the areas that you feel might be the most beneficial for you. Where are you coming up shorter than what might be considered relatively normal? Where is the training stress coming from? And how is that feeling? Try to stand as tall as you can. Push the hips forward. Block the knee if you need to. All right. Excellent. Now for me, from here, I like to just shift into a little downward facing dog. I'm going to move next into some calf stretching and some hamstring, a little bit more targeted hamstring stretching. Downward facing dog is a nice way to dynamically move into that position. So you can see I'm kind of shifting from side to side Dynamically opening up the calf and the hamstring. Straightening the knee as I just allow the heel to drop to the floor without forcing it. All right. Excellent. All right, so over onto the railing now. I'm going to use this railing for some calf stretching, and then also maybe one round of pails and rails. So my goal here is to keep the foot right in the same line, the same plane of motion as I'm leaning into, which is not quite perpendicular to the railing. To give you a decent angle. I'm just relaxing the heel down. Keep the knee straight. So I'm really focusing on the large muscle of the calf at this point, the gastrocnemius. If I needed to, I can always bring the foot in a little closer and take a little bit of the stretch out. The key is to keep the hips forward. Keep your pelvis underneath you. All right. That's about a minute of passive stretching. I'm going to go ahead and move the foot back just a little bit. So it's nice to just relax into these positions and allow the tissue to lengthen just a little bit. Nothing forced. It takes time. You can't rush process of lengthening. You want to reach a nice active end range. And by active, I mean allowing the time necessary to get to the point where we can do some pails and rails. And of course, what we know is what we're doing is in fact passive stretching, right? It's preparation for our strengthening. Continue to push the hips forward, slide the heel back, try to lengthen my spine, and just relax in. All right, that's about 2 minutes. I'm going to go through one set of pails and rails here. So I've got a position now where I can gradually increase the pressure of my forefoot into floor on the right side. So I'm ramping up that pressure, radiating tension throughout my body. That's about 10 seconds, 14, 15. Okay, for 15 seconds, I'm pressing that right forefoot fairly hard into the floor as I radiate tension throughout my body. We need about 15 seconds of this. All right. There we go. Slight pause. Now rails. So I'm going to try to lift the forefoot up toward my shin. Now you're not seeing a big change, of course, in my movement, but there's a lot going on at that right foot. As I try to draw the forefoot up toward the shin. Here we go. 15 seconds. Radiate tension, lengthen the spine. I'm squeezing this railing just a little bit. Helps me to radiate tension through my trunk. All right, there we go. So I'm just going to hold on to this passive stretch. So I've gone through one sequence of pails and rails. I may not have hit the exact duration, but it's really not about being exactly 15 seconds of ramp, 15 seconds of tension. It's more about the general spirit of how we're approaching what we're doing. We can get an approximation of that duration. We can achieve what it is that we're looking for. All right. Again, I'm at a little bit of an angle to the camera. Just finding that position. I've got a clock nearby, so I'm keeping an eye on the clock. You may see me turn my head to the right. Just keeping an idea on the clock. I always think it's a really good idea to have a clock that you can move around your training space, position it so you have a general idea of how much time you're spending in each of these positions. And again, same approach here. Lengthen the spine, keep the knee straight, keep my hips, pelvis underneath me. Push the pelvis forward, just try to keep the heel on the floor. For today, I'm going to skip bent knee, calf, pails and rails. However, I will come back to that in a couple of days for sure, and make sure that I cover that. Remember, if you need to, if the stretch is feeling too intense, you can shorten it by bringing your foot closer to the area that you're leaning on. You want to make sure we ease gently into all of these stretching positions, okay? Nothing is forced. All right, I'm at about 1.5 minutes, close to 2 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and do one set of pails and rails. So I've got a 15-second ramp where I'm pressing that forefoot gradually into the floor, trying to push the ground away from me, radiating tension throughout my body. It's about 10 seconds. All right, here we go. So 15-second radiation of tension here. 15 seconds pushing that forefoot fairly hard into the floor. Focus of 15 seconds of radiation. All right, now relax for a moment and then reverse. So now rails. Oh my goodness. Just trying to bring that forefoot up to the shin as much as I can. Really contracting through the inner joint, inner portion of the foot, if you will, front of the shin, or what we're referring to in this as the regressive angle. All right, 15 seconds radiation of tension. All right. Okay, so I'm just gonna, again, relax in this passive stretch position. I could spend a little bit more time there, take a little bit more time if I needed to. Now I'm going to move to the hamstring. All right, now I'm going to ease into some hamstring passive stretching and prepare for some pails and rails here. We know that this is time consuming, but the value is unbelievable because we're doing two things simultaneously. We're restoring a length and balance to the connective tissue and the soft tissue, but we're also strengthening the tissue, improving the integration and connection. We're helping the tissue to remodel, especially in the presence of any scar tissue. We're improving our control of these joints at end range. And when I look at the hip joint and my ability to move it into extension and flexion, it really is reliant upon having better control. The more control, the greater the accessible range of motion. All right, so as I'm passive stretching, thinking about rotating that hip, that pelvis, lengthening through the back side of the hip, trying to lengthen my spine as much as I can. I'm not gonna lie, this is not a very comfortable position to sit in, or stand in, but but I only have to go through this once. All right, a little pails and rails here, so I'm going to increase radiation as I push the heel down into the pad. 15 seconds as I build tension. Remember to radiate tension throughout your body and increase that radiation. All right, 15 seconds. Relax for a moment, and then rails. Trying to lift my leg, oh my goodness. 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 9, 10, 11. All right, that was hard. Of course, in this position, I can rotate the hip as well. If I can find areas where I may feel like there's a bit more restriction. Remember, slight bend of the knee and trying to bring the foot toward the shin into dorsiflexion. All right, let's go to the other side. This training, while definitely recovery oriented in one sense, is also very challenging in another sense. So we want to make sure that we are ready for it mentally and physically, and that we understand that there's going to be some time needed after we go through this for some recovery. Pails and rails are neurologically challenging. Again, slight bend of the knee. I'm going to try to actively dorsiflex the foot, bring the foot up toward the shin. The entire time I'm rotating the pelvis this way. Again, I can move the hip axially to see if there are areas of restriction. Try to lengthen the spine. I'm about 90 seconds into my passive stretch on this side. So again, try to lengthen the spine, bring my trunk a little closer, but always thinking longer, longer, longer. All right. So let's try some pails and rails here. 15-second active press into the pad. 10. Gradual increase in tension, and then 15 seconds of tension, pressing, driving the heel into the pad. 8, 10. Find myself breathing under the shield, a concept you may have heard me discuss before. All right, some rails. Oh my goodness, trying to lift the leg. It, of course, is not coming off the pad because I'm at my true end range here. But I'm trying to lift it, trying to work on this closed angle. More lengthen of the spine. All right, okay. So, pails and rails are really a process where you're just working with what you have and feeling your way through it, and just spending a little bit of quality time creating hopefully good inputs into the tissue to allow for better improved passive length and also control, active control of that tissue and healthier joints as well. All right, for this last sequence, I'm going to come back into this 90-90 position, and I'm going to start by rotating my trunk so that I am facing my thigh, which is externally rotated. And here I just want to go ahead and just think about lengthening my spine as much as I can. And drawing some length into the back side of the hip by pushing the hip back as I lengthen my spine over my externally rotated thigh. So I just want to go ahead and work into this position as much as I can, trying to make sure that my trunk is perpendicular. If I need to post, I have no problems with that. Just go ahead and try to relax your legs down. Now what we're going to do is, we spent a little bit of time here, we're going to try to rotate our entire trunk and come over to the internally rotated thigh. And if I need to, it's perfectly fine. Come back, post your hands behind you, and see if you can get your trunk so that it's perpendicular to that thigh. And then if you like, you can lean back a little bit, drive your legs into the floor, but gently with control. And then what we're going to do here is, with this internally rotated leg, I'll go ahead and point my toes and see if I can rotate this right hip all the way into external rotation. I'm trying to keep my left leg into position. And it's worth pointing out that at any point in time, if you have some discomfort, feel free to make some adjustments to your position. Trying to keep that right toe pointed and lengthened. Moving very slowly here as I try to get that right thigh down. Again, I'm trying to keep this left hip open as much as I can. And then eventually, I come down onto the other side. Now, if I go back to the point at which I'm here, if I go from this position again, I've rotated my trunk this way, as I start to open this hip, when I reach a point where I've got maximum opening of both hips, so I'm trying as much as possible to open the right but keep the left down. This is a really nice and challenging position to be into. So I'm trying to control how far the left goes, and also controlling the right as well. So this is moving through our hips as much as we can, controlling each. All right, I'll just take a moment and work back to the other side. So I'm facing my right thigh, which is externally rotated. I'm going to rotate to face my left. It's very, very normal to find one side very different than the other. So we're just trying to work through the outer ranges of motion here and control as much as possible what we can do with each one of these hips. So again, pointing that left toe, rotating the left independently of the right, posting on my arms, trying to keep that right hip open, fully externally rotated, not allowing for it to come up any more than it absolutely has to. Again, here, I've kind of got to that position where I've got both opened up. Try to make sure to keep breathing through these sequences, even though at times it feels like you're working right at that end range and you almost want to hold your breath. But the reality is you want to breathe into these positions. You're trying to get these joints to move as independently as you can. So I'm moving very, very slowly and just trying to control as much as I can. All right, and then I come back into external rotation. All right, and then I finish here once again with a nice forward lean to lengthen the back. All right, thanks for joining me.